Hello and welcome to Just Films and That, the podcast that celebrates films we think are underrated, underappreciated, underseen, or we just really, really wanted to talk about them. I'm your host for this week, Alice Oliver. With me as always is Josh Hallam, and it was his turn to pick the film this time, and he went with The Damned United from 2009. So let's get stuck in. So then, Josh, as I mentioned, you picked this week's film, The Damned United from 2009. I did. So, spoiler warning, listeners, if you haven't seen it. So, Josh, tell us, what is this film about and why did you pick it?
Okay, so this is based on a book which in itself is based on the true story of a football manager that many people listening to this will know or may not know, called Brian Clough, who's a very successful manager in his day. Essentially, it's based on his ill-fated tenure at Leeds United, where he managed them for something like 6 weeks, 40-something days, something like that. It's about a bit more than that, but we'll come on to that. I picked this. Okay, so is it underrated? No, it's probably not underrated. It's quite highly rated. Mm-hmm. Is it underseen? I think it might be a little bit underseen. And I guess I picked it because I just wanted to talk about it, which is not something that we say very often, but I did.
That's a rarity.
Yeah, I love this film. I like that it got me thinking, because we were on Team of Our Lives talking about Goal, and I was thinking about other better football films than Goal. and The Damned United is one that always comes to my mind, not just as a good football film, but as a good film and a film that I love. And I think what I like about it is that I think you can enjoy this if you're not into football, because it's kind of about an obsession and pride and rivalry and that sort of thing. So yes, it is about Brian Clough's failed time at Leeds United, but it is also about Brian Clough as a man being obsessed with the fact that he was spurned by Don Revie, who was another football manager at the time who was at Leeds when he was at Derby, and his relationship with Peter Taylor, who was his assistant at many, many clubs through the years and through their career. So that's why I picked it, and that's what it's about. What I really want to know is, had you seen it before? And I'm really, really interested to know what you thought about this, because we've had the odd chat about football, and you've said yourself you are a fan, but you're not, massively invested in it.
Passive. I'm like a passive fan.
You're more into rugby, aren't you?
I am a little bit. Because it's the only thing Wales are any good at, I'm telling you.
Cheese.
Cheese, to be fair, yeah, and a nice leek and potato pie.
Yeah, leeks.
Bit of Welsh cakes.
Sheeps. That's not a word, is it?
Beautiful, beautiful creatures.
Anyway, what did you think? Well, had you seen it before, and what did you reckon?
So I hadn't seen it. I do think I'd heard of it, but I definitely thought it was about Man United. So I was surprised to learn that it was about Leeds United. Wasn't expecting that. I'd heard of Brian Clough because I think I've mentioned to you, like, my dad and my brother are football crazy. Like, it's all they talk about. It's all they're invested in. They're both coaches. My dad was a referee for years and years. So there was a lot of Brian Clough books, like, knocking around the house. Yeah. I thought his name was Brian Clough. So my brother ripped me mercilessly for that, because it looks like Clough. And I was like, no, it's Clough. So I hadn't seen it, had heard of it, had sort of, I guess, not a great deal of expectation one way or the other. Like, I didn't have high expectations, didn't have low expectations. I know that I can enjoy sports films about sports that I'm not really familiar with, or about situations I'm not really familiar with. If something's written well and there's good performances in it, I'm there. It can be about hockey, it can be about American football, it can be about basketball. Like, it's still enjoyable if it's done well. Overall, I was really impressed, to be honest. And I think, goes without saying, he's relieved, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, don't worry. The most impressive thing about this film is Michael Sheen. Completely. He's just brilliant anyway. So when I saw that he was in this, I was already looking forward to it. I'm a big fan of his. Again, another brilliant Welsh export. One of the finest that we have. And he did a terrific job. He was incredibly convincing. He did such a great job at portraying this man. Like you say, he's obsessive. He's so focused to the point of almost mania. He has this look in his eye throughout most of the film of a guy who is almost possessed and is just desperate to make it. And something really interesting about it was, so obviously Brian Clough is from Middlesbrough, I believe.
Yeah.
And so you could hear that Michael Sheen was doing this kind of northeast accent, but then it would sort of float into this kind of Yorkshire accent. So I'm thinking, this is a real shame. He's giving such a good performance, but his accent is a bit all over the place and it feels like it's inconsistent. But then, after I'd seen the film, I watched an interview with Brian Clough, And that's exactly what he sounds like.
It's exactly what he sounds
like. He sounds like a guy who grew up maybe in Middlesbrough, but then moved a lot, like around Yorkshire, around North Yorkshire. And so then adapted this kind of weird, all over the place accent. So I was like, Michael Sheen. I mean, it's one thing to try and pull off a straightforward accent, but he's managed... Oh, I was just so impressed.
He's unbelievable.
He managed to do the accent of someone who didn't have a straightforward accent. Now that is talent.
Yeah, accents layered into accents is a skill, isn't it? It's got to be. And I don't think there's not many people, I don't think, who are better at playing real people than Michael Sheen. He's done Tony Blair. He's done obviously Brian Clough in this. He did Chris Tarrant quite recently.
Oh my, that was brilliant.
And
he's just brilliant. He was also in Twilight. He's also in Good Omens, so he can do like the fantasy thing too.
He's played himself.
What a range that man has.
He's brilliant, and that you are absolutely right. That is the first thing that most people I think would say about this film, which is, oh my god, the performances across the board are brilliant,
very
but
good.
None more so than Michael Sheen. I mean, if you look at videos of Brian Clough around the time, it's eerie, it's spot on. It's just even because the interview at the end is a real interview.
Yes, I watched it. That was what I watched. I went to watch it afterwards.
It's crazy, but then it's not, not just Michael Sheen. Cole Meany, who plays Dom Revy, is brilliant as well.
He's almost the spit of the guy, isn't
almost
he?
a spit.
Yeah.
Like they get the hair and the makeup and the clothes in this. It's so good. Like, so the guy directed it, I can't remember if it's Tom Hopper or Tom Hooper. I think it's Tom Hooper. He went on to direct The King's Speech after this, and then obviously a few other things. Les Mis and Cats, which we'll say less about. But I mean, the direction in this is brilliant. But Michael Sheen's performance, I mean, how has he not won an Oscar? And I know a lot of people, the Oscars aren't always the pinnacle. I think a lot of people think that, if you haven't won an Oscar, you mean nothing. But there's plenty of people who've won Oscars for things that you think, it's subjective, isn't it? I don't think that deserved that Diff deserved that, but didn't get it. That sort of thing.
The people in the films that get Oscars are just the ones that put enough money into the marketing campaign. That is all it is. Sorry to break it to you, but it doesn't mean a great deal.
It's the deep state. It's the deep state.
But yeah, like you say then, so the performances across the board are very impressive. The cast is incredible. Like every other guy, I was like, I know him.
Yeah, real Stephen Graham.
Oh, Stephen, he pops up, doesn't he?
He just pops up
everywhere, that fella. Oh my God, Finchy as well. Finchy.
Yeah, Finchy, Ralph Ineson.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
I find that it's absolutely crazy. If there's
Jim
a British thing out there, yes, again, wonderful.
Oh, the guy from Speed 2's in it. The Scottish guy.
Brian McCarty.
Yeah, he's Dave McCarty. He's got the tie shop.
Is he?
That guy.
It's all connected, Josh. It's all connected.
But no, it is. So do you think, one thing I was quite interested to know is, obviously you do like football, but if you didn't, do you think you could enjoy this?
Yes, certainly. And I do think that this was one of the things that I put down in my likes, and something that the film did really well is it explains everything that you need to know in a way that is clear, in a way that is concise, in a way that makes sense to you. Because I didn't know about the events of this film. I didn't know what Brian Clough stood for. I didn't really know, kind of who he was and what he'd accomplished. I knew his name and that was about it. And I didn't know anything about Leeds United in the 70s, and I didn't know anything about was it Derby County?
Yeah,
the first
Derby,
team that he's managing. But they explain it all really well, and they use a lot of different techniques to do that. They've got this great thing where when he starts winning loads of matches with Derby County, you'll get this kind of montage thing cut together of them going up the table, and then you've got all this stuff that looks like archive footage, but it is them, it's those actors, and it is Michael Sheen, all edited to Hush by Deep Purple, which I just thought was awesome. And so that's really engaging.
Yeah.
And it gets you excited, and you want Derby County to do well, and you're like, oh my God, this is exciting.
Even when he's watching the football, you're watching him watch the football. So there's not that much live football where you're like, I don't know what's going on. And even when they're talking about little bits about the game, I think you could know pretty much nothing about football. My other half absolutely hates football, and she's watched this with me, and she thinks it's quite a good film. There's a bit where they talk about what they need in terms of the team, and he says things like, I need someone with a good pair of feet, or I need someone with a good head. And that's not what he means by a good head is an intelligent player, but it's not You're not going, I don't know what that means. He's not like, he's not saying what I need is a Metsala that sort of drifts in and out of, or a box-to-box midfielder, or a ball-winning defender. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't say anything like that. So it doesn't isolate you if you don't know anything about football, because not everyone, it's hard to believe, but not everyone likes football. And that, I think, is one of the achievements of the film. And the bit you're talking about where it shows the progression of the team is brilliant, because they do a fantastic thing, which I think must be quite hard to do, where they merge real and fake.
Mm-hmm.
So it is Brian Clough. It's Michael Sheen and Timothy Spall as Peter Taylor, but then it's obviously real matches.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really good. I think it's just a really well told story.
Yeah, lots of attention to detail, and it keeps it exciting and keeps you engaged. And like you said before, a lot of the time you're watching the match, and there's one in particular where he doesn't even go out to the ground, like he won't even stand on the pitch, and he's just stood in like this office underground sort of thing, and he can just see people's shadows sort of standing up and sitting down, and that it's all very tense and it's all very dramatic, and you've got this sequence where there's no dialogue or anything for quite a long time. You can just hear the sounds of the crowd outside, and sometimes they cheer and sometimes they boo, and he doesn't really know what's happening, and it's not until his mate comes down and he's like starts smiling, he's like, oh yes, we won this. The mise-en-scène and the sound and all that sort of thing really transports you back to that time, to this kind of, what is it, late 60s into the early 70s.
Yeah, mid-early 70s, all that.
So brilliant things like the use of the Yorkshire Television logo and the set. His kids are reading comic books that are obviously from that time. The cars, the clothes, the props, the interior design of the houses. It just reminds me so much of Coronation Street, like that sort of thing. And it really transports you back to this time. And I think that did a really good job. A lot of the sounds, like I said, some of the music that they use, and even the way that it's shot, like the hue that they use makes it look like it was filmed
and grey
and like it was filmed in the 70s. Not that it's just set then. And I thought that was really clever, and I think that did a really good job at engaging you with what was happening on screen.
Yeah, it feels cold and muddy and dirty.
As it should.
It feels like when men were men, Alice, and football was hard, and if you got kicked in the bollocks, you just kept running.
But interesting that you do say that, because one of my things that I observed was how different footballers looked back then to how they look now. Those lads did not care one bit about their appearance. None of them are getting their hair done. They've all got these big, long, unkempt barnets, whereas the guys today, a lot of them look like supermodels. They look phenomenal. They're in such excellent physical shape. Whereas back then, like, obviously we didn't know as much about sort of strength and power, and actually being really strong can be really useful. It's not just about how fast you can run. And the fact that the pitches are just muddy as all hell. Like if it's raining when you're playing, that's it. Your pitch is getting ruined. And obviously we don't have that anymore. So again, that kind of just really brings to life, like, oh, it's a bit rough, in it, like all the hardships of the 60s and 70s. But I thought that was all really good, and they did a really good job of that.
I love seeing, as a football fan, I love seeing all the old kits and all of it. Like, it's just proper. Yeah. I just think it looks really good. It looks like a really, because essentially this is a period piece. It's just a modern period piece. So I reckon if you were around at the time and you're seeing that old Leeds kit or the old Derby kit, United, Liverpool, all the old kits, it must be brilliant. I think something else I wanted to ask you. What did you think of something I really like is the non-linear narrative? So it skips between his time at Leeds, where he's failing, back to his time at Derby, where he's succeeding. And in other films, there's been times when it might use a non-linear narrative where it's really hard to follow. But then there are other films like this, or I don't know, the first one that comes to mind is something like Pulp Fiction, where it was skipping between times, and it really enriches the telling of the story. What did you think about the way they use that?
That was definitely in my likes pile, the fact that we jump from one era to the next, because it doesn't want to be too much about Derby County, does it? No. It's about Leeds. That's the main thing here. This was his power point, his boiling point, shall we say, the moment of his turmoil. So you don't want to focus too much on the Derby County thing, but all that's happening is very important to understanding him as a person and understanding what this means to him. So when something happens in the present day, so we're talking like in the 70s now with Leeds, we'll jump back to something that he did with Derby County that is now relevant. It shows his growth, or it shows him comparing one situation to another, or it shows there's a lesson that he's learned. And I thought it was really clever. And again, keeps you really engaged. It means not that I think you would particularly get bored or anything, but it means you can't have like sort of too much of one thing and then not enough of another. And they got the balance bang on, I think, like moving from one to the next. You weren't lingering with one too long. And it's such an intense and fascinating journey to see what he goes on. And all that Derby County stuff was absolutely essential to the emotional connection that you make with those characters. And I think if you didn't do that, if you just showed him with Leeds and just showed him with that story, you just wouldn't feel anywhere near as much, I don't think, especially as someone who doesn't know the full story around him and about what it is that he did.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I think something that as well that we haven't touched on yet, which I loved about it, was the script.
Oh, certainly.
So the script is, I think it's by Peter Morgan, who now does The Crown, and he's done a couple of other sort of based on real life. I think he did The Special Relationship, which was then adapted with Michael Sheen in it, actually, I think. And then The Queen, he might have done The Queen as well.
Yeah.
But the script captures the way that Clough and people around him spoke at the time. There's a very, and I don't just mean what we know publicly, because obviously what he was like publicly and what he's like privately, unless you knew him, then you don't really know. But there's a scene, isn't there, where he goes into the Leeds boardroom to have a sort of talk with them, and he does this big speech about what he's going to do for the club and all this sort of thing, and how he's going to put the smiles back on the faces of Yorkshire, and he does this big monologue to these sort of old stuffy guys in the boardroom, and even though it may well never have happened, it captures his way of speaking so well that you think that could be something that did happen. And I just think that happens throughout the dialogue between the characters, particularly Taylor and Clough, the way he speaks to the players. It just really, and I think it really endears you and really makes you like them and want them to succeed in what they're doing. And
even though it's already happened,
even though
we already know what went on,
and all that, I just think it's a brilliant film, and I think this is how a lot of the best films, that are considered really amazing films, are quite often linked to sport, because sport, I think we've talked about before, is a really good framing device because it has rules and competitiveness, and it does attract certain characters. So if you think about Raging Bull and that sort of thing, the replacements, of
course.
But I think the key is make it about the sport, but don't isolate your audience who don't like the sport.
Yeah.
So some films that they do it badly, that's what they do. Whereas this, Raging Bull, other ones, they go, this isn't really about, I suppose it's like they always say, Jaws isn't about a shark, don't they? Well, this isn't about football. This is about being completely obsessed with something, regardless of what it is. And I just think it captures it perfectly.
So we'll move on now to talking about things that we perhaps didn't like about the film or anything we would change. And I feel like Josh isn't going to have much to say here, but here we go anyway. Go on, Josh. Have you got anything you'd like to discuss?
Well, we always try and be balanced, don't we?
Of course.
So even if the balance is off, we always try and give a balanced argument. So I would say there's a few things I'd like to have had, and I'm not going to go into this loads because I'm not an expert, but I'd like to have had more exploration of Clough as a flawed character, as a flawed man.
Okay.
Because historically, it's not, it's well documented. He was a flawed man. He had his demons himself. He had his prejudices. He had his issues. I would maybe have liked to have seen more of that. I understand that might undermine the message of the film, but I do think there's something that could have been done about that, even just to touch on it a little bit. The other thing is, and again, it's a difficult one, this. It's very male.
Of course
there's not a strong female character in this who has more than a few lines. It almost certainly wouldn't pass the Bechdel test. I mean, the female characters that get the most lines in it are ones who are real people being used in archive footage.
Yeah.
So, and then, it is a male, it's a true story based on male characters. But that's not to say I wouldn't have liked to have seen more from perhaps Brian Clough or Peter Taylor's wives. Because other than seeing them maybe once or twice sat at the dinner table or at a celebration with them, we don't get much. And I think if you're going to explore a real person, it's probably important to explore that side of them and that sort of thing. But also, this is a real Brian Clough, but it's also not entirely real because it must, in some bits, must have been exaggerated and extrapolated for the story. So if that's true, then let's see a little bit more about their home life. Let's see a little bit more about the relationships with the wives and the toll that this obsession took on them, because it must have done in some ways. But
certainly,
but that's really it for me. And both those things, I understand why they haven't been touched on, but I think if you were to improve it, because it's only an hour and a half, so there's nothing to say you couldn't put more in it, then that is what I would do. What about you?
Yeah. So yeah, similar with the sort of lack of female representation. Again, I know it's a film about football in the 60s and 70s. There ain't going to be many women in it, and that's fine, and I get that.
Yeah.
But like you say, the two female characters we have are their wives, and most of the lines they have are them nagging their husbands.
Yeah.
Like, get off the phone, stop talking to him, and all this. We get more from his kids. Because he spends more time with the kids, doesn't he? Like, he's with them in the car and stuff. So I would have liked more from the wives, like, you know, and seeing, like you say, the toll that it is taking on them. But and I'm sure that it did. Like, obviously, it's nice. Oh, you know, my husband's pretty successful. We might have, you know, quite a good income. That's all very nice. But he's clearly obsessed with this other thing, and it's clearly very distracting for him, and probably not great for his health as well to be stressed all that time. So I would have just liked to have seen a little bit more, maybe some of their genuine concerns and fears, and maybe get some character development from them. But, you know, I'm not going to write a letter about it. The other thing as well was I thought it ended too abruptly.
Right.
Like, I think I could have done with another 15 minutes. So we've got Brian and Peter they're kind of reuniting, aren't they? Because they've had a bit of a row about the Leeds thing. Like, I think Peter has left him to go somewhere else. He was annoyed that they didn't go and work for Brighton, wasn't he? Because they'd not signed a contract, they'd take
a job. They take a job, and
the Brighton club had paid for them to go on holiday.
Yeah.
It was kind of like the deal was done, and then obviously the Leeds job come up. So then Brian's like, well, obviously I have to go and take that. And Peter was a bit pissed off about that. I thought, you know, that means we're not men of our words and all this. So then they reunite. He goes to his house because he's gone to Brighton, I think, hasn't he? So he goes to Brighton to go and see him. He says something like, you can almost see France or so. It's because he's like a fish out of water being that far down south, isn't he? I mean, he's from Middlesbrough, for Christ's sake. So that was all quite funny. So then he gets on his knees and he grovels to him and he's like, you are the best and I love you so much and all this. And then they hug and it ends pretty much, or the story ends. And then you get a bit of this archive footage and a bit of this explanation about how he went on to manage Nottingham Forest, I believe it was, and had sort of some success with them. And I felt a bit hollow. I was like, oh, like, because after they'd reunited, I thought we were going to get their last hurrah. I thought we were going to get to see them back in action. Yes, this is it. This is where we go for gold and, you know, we win everything and everything's great. And it didn't happen. So they hug, it ends, and I was like, oh, God, I would have liked to have seen some of the Nottingham Forest stuff.
Yeah, well, that's where Clough is probably most known for, is for winning the 2 European Cups back-to-back with Forest. So were you waiting for a Damned United 2?
Maybe not a whole film, just maybe another 15 minutes.
A little bit more of a little bit more of a resolution sort of thing.
Yeah, of course. And obviously this is just my prejudices coming in, and, you know, what I want doesn't necessarily make a great film. And it isn't about, like, it's called The Damned United. It's about Leeds, and the story with Leeds had ended at that point, and then he went on to Nottingham Forest. So I get that, it's done, and not everything needs to be wrapped up in a nice little present with a bow on top. But I just, that was just a comment that I had, was that it ended, and I was a bit like, oh, like I was kind of sad that it ended, I guess. I could have done
it's not always bad to want more, I suppose. Exactly. So, you know.
Exactly. But apart from that, that was kind of it. Like, I didn't really have any major issues with it. I do wonder if you're not interested in football, I don't know if you would watch it. I think if you're not interested in football, you'd still enjoy it, but I just don't think you'd seek it out.
You might not be drawn to it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it would only be, you know, if someone in your life who loves football wanted to show it to you, or if you were on a podcast about films and someone made you watch it, that sort of thing. Like, I don't think I would have ever watched it otherwise. But yeah, overall, I was pretty damn impressed. And you clearly love it as well, which is cool.
Oh, I love it.
So we'll move on now then to talking about the critical reception, and we'll see if we can decide if it is underrated or underseen. But I think Josh really picked this because it was one of them films he just really, really wanted to chat about.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen the critical reception. You said you don't think it's underrated, so it probably didn't do too bad. I reckon the people who have seen it probably really like it. You've got some top quality performances in there and a well-written script. And some high-octane, football and adrenaline going on. I reckon we could safely say it's in the 7s somewhere.
Right.
And I reckon we'll go high 7. I think I'll be generous. I might creep all the way up.
That's what you'd give it.
I would give it that.
You give it a high 7.
I reckon it got a 7.8.
Right. Okay.
Go on.
So, as you said, just to reiterate what you said, yeah, I don't think this is underrated because I think it's pretty highly rated. I think there's probably an argument to say it's underseen because, like you said, I think if you don't like football, you're probably not drawn to it.
No, and I don't think you'd seek it out.
Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about it. Anyway, let's have a look. So at the time of recording, it gets on IMDb 7.5 out of 10.
Okay, yeah.
On Rotten Tomatoes, from the audience,
I'm so interested, yeah.
It gets 85%.
Wow.
And from the critics on Rotten Tomatoes,
oh my God, yeah,
92%.
Holy moly!
Now,
wowzers.
For me, that is appropriately rated.
Do you think?
Yeah, I think it's that good. I think it's either If you even that out, what is it? About 85, probably roughly, isn't it? In the middle, around the mid 80s. So for me, yeah, I don't think there's much wrong with it. I think it's brilliant. I particularly enjoy it. I do love this film. So I'm going to say it's appropriately rated and underseen. You might say differently though. What do you reckon?
I mean, I would say maybe that's a bit overrated. Just
What?
That 92 is a hefty score.
Your 92 is a hefty score. So yeah.
So I would say it's a little bit overrated, but I can certainly see the value in it, and I will agree that it is underseen, and it is not about Man United.
It's not about the football team, Manchester United.
It's not.
In conclusion, Alice's thoughts. Yeah. It's not about Manchester.
This is what I've learned.
There we go. The Damned United is underseen, and we disagree a little bit on the rating because I think that it is appropriately rated and Alice is wrong. So, yes, next week. Oh, big news, Alice.
Big news, guys.
It is our 100th episode.
Wow.
We're getting a letter from the Queen.
Oh, yes, I can't wait.
So, we're not going to tell...
100 weeks
100
of just films and that. That's wild.
100
Well done, Josh.
Thank you very much.
Good on you.
And
you've been here since the start.
Well done,
I just hopped on.
Well done for you for coming in like about 25% of the way in, something like that. So, yes, well, tune in next week. We've got big plans. We might have a guest. We don't know. We have plans, is what I'm saying. So join us.
Expect something
Expect
awesome.
some sort of episode, probably a little bit extended as well. So expect a good episode next week. And all that remains to say is, if you do want to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. And we're on all the social medias. If you just search Just Films and That, wherever you're on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the usual social media places, and we're on the television as well.
We are indeed on the television every Friday evening on the local TV network. So if you live in Bristol, Birmingham, Leeds, Liverpool, or the North East, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. We're also on Sky, Channel 195. That's every Friday night from 6 o'clock and sometimes Mondays as well.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us, and it's goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.